Hey, everybody, welcome back. Bill De La Cruz with the Origination Point podcast. And right now I'm doing a series of talks on this whole concept about is DEI dead? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I have to tell you that 5 years ago, I never even thought about that concept, about it being dead, because the approach to diversity and equity and inclusion was really rooted in just being aware of the impacts that race or gender or age or ability or disability or any identifying factor has on how we see each other. And in the last 10 years, this concept has become so politicized. The first 10 or 15 years of my involvement in this work, nobody even cared. Nobody talked about it. It wasn't like a thing to even be aware of it. And I stepped into this space probably in the early 2000s. So for 10, even 15 years, it wasn't even a part of mainstream conversation. And now it's become so mainstream that people have just made up their own ideas about what it means and how it's connected to either if you're liberal or conservative or if you're crazy or not. It's just really been interesting. And I think as a whole, the whole business realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion work is a $7 billion industry. And what I'm going to start with and say is there are a lot of people who are practitioners doing this work who are doing a lot of damage, who shouldn't be doing this work. They are performative in that they are just going into organizations and doing a workshop and telling people everything's fixed. Or they're creating a dashboard and saying, if you use this dashboard, you can track the things that are impacting you and you can tell whether people are growing or not. And I call those people opportunists. I can't even tell you how many times in the last 5 years, especially after COVID, that people have reached out to me and said, I'm really tired of what I'm doing, no matter what it was, what their role in their current workplace was, and said, I really like this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. What school did you go to get a degree, or how did you get into this? And it's a crazy question because you can get a certificate, and yet that still doesn't make you adept at guiding people through a process of awareness, which ultimately is what the work should be about. Not just about presenting a workshop on Native American Month or African American History Month or any of the months that we have, or telling people about the history of racism in your state or in your community. And a lot of approaches are like that, where it's more about let's talk about race versus let's understand how my ability to interact with people from different backgrounds is affected by how I see them, because ultimately that's really the work. And as I said in the last podcast, diversity is just about the multiple intersectionalities of identity that we bring. And regardless of the group, or no matter how homogeneous it is, whether it's all men, all women, all black, all white, all brown, all of a certain working definition, no matter what, you always have diversity, because even within those homogeneous groups, you have people who are individuals who have different life experiences, different ethnic backgrounds. And that creates diversity. So if diversity was the end game, then we're all done, because we live in a very diverse country on all levels. And so the idea is not really to settle in diversity, it's to value and accept and create opportunities to move in and out of different groups so that we can understand how other people do things and not make up stories about it. And I'll say again, equity is a process, it's not an outcome. And the process of equity is differentiating. And what we're differentiating for is opportunity, access, and inclusion. So it's not just relatable to people of color, it's relatable to everyone. Everyone should have the ability to have opportunities to achieve their goals. Everyone should have access to whatever tools or skills or paths they need to achieve their goals, whether it's in an organization or whether it's in the personal realm of just engaging in personal growth. And inclusion is really looking at the policies and practices and protocols, the behaviors, the language, the things that we do and say, and the ways that we treat each other. And so the reason why I wanted to do a series of these podcasts titled Is DEI Dead is because so much of what we see in the media today is rooted around false narratives about people and about this work that aren't really true. So there's been all these new terms that have come forward. Woke. What is woke? Well, woke became politically co-opted as an umbrella for progressive values, using it with negative connotations. And truly, though, the term was originally coined by progressive Black Americans and used in racial justice movements in the mid to early 1900s. To be woke politically in the Black community at that time meant that someone is informed, educated, and conscious of social injustice and racial inequality. And that's out of Merriam-Webster. And so the term, in one of its contemporary meanings, gained more popularity during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2014. And then after the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice, and the list goes on and on, the phrase grew more, and it was used in protest and activist circles for many years. So it started out early on in the 1900s, and then it got politically co-opted. And it has grown into this notion that signifies identity-based social justice issues that more progressives or liberals or Democrats work towards, and it's been used as a tool from the Republican side. And so the term has been used in a way that is being made up by the people who want to have it mean a certain outcome that supports their approach. So in the DeSantis administration, it was defined as the belief that there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to address them, and that they reject woke ideology, will never surrender to it. People have come here because of our policies. And so this idea of being woke is now being used as a negative connotation that means that you're for some type of liberal, progressive approach. And then it got connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And so this is the way that this culture war around DEI has grown. And on top of being woke, which, to be really honest, as a practitioner of this work, from my perspective, it's more about being aware. Are we aware of what's happening in our systems? Are we aware of what's happening beyond just racial perspectives? Because when we talk about systemic barriers, it's more than just race. It's gender, it's age, it's ability, it's disability. And so this is the biggest challenge of the DEI work in 2025, 2024, 2025, is that the politicization of this and the ability for a group of people on both sides of the aisle. So I'm not defending anybody. Both sides of the aisle are using it as a tool to achieve a goal that I don't think it was designed for. And so part of this approach is to get you to start to think about, well, what does it mean to you? And how do people who I call opportunists impact the work in a negative way that is more performative, where they just go in, do a workshop or check a box for an organization, and then just move on to the next group. And so it's really important to me that we start to have these conversations, and we start really think about what is the impact of what we're doing, and how do we measure the ability to make change from the perspective of being aware of our biases or being aware of our judgments. And the states who have created anti-critical race theory legislation basically say you can't bring things into a conversation that disrupts people. However, if through the process of a workshop it gets disruptive, you can facilitate that conversation, which almost is nonsensical to me. And so I think what we need to do today in 2024 is we really need to start a larger conversation about what is the outcome that diversity, equity, inclusion work was designed to do, and stop making up stories about it. And so for me, I've never called my work in 24 years DEI, because that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is rehumanizing. What I'm doing is heart work. What I'm doing is connecting people so that they start to realize that there's more that connects us than divides us. We live in a world and in a country and in a society where we're being socialized to believe that there's more that divides us. And I believe that there's a lot more that connects us. And having traveled across the country talking to people, I know that's true, because I have been able to create connections with people from all of those spectrums. And I'll just keep saying, I don't like labels. So I only use them as a way of describing the ways that we see each other through the lens, even seeing each other as a conservative or a liberal or a progressive, or pick any word. It has this whole set of stereotypes and biases that go along with it. And so all of a sudden, you don't see me as a person named Bill. You see me as this label that you put on me that's either conservative or liberal or in the middle or progressive or whatever it is. And then you treat me that way. And that's what's false, is that I'm a human being and I have my own thoughts, I have my own perspective, I have my own approach, and everyone else does too. And it's interesting when I talk to people and I tell them what parts of the country I'm going to, and they'll ask me things like, well, do you know what those people are like there? And I say, yeah, they're human beings like me. They're people who want better for their children. They're people who are doing their best to get by in this crazy world that we all live in. And that's how I see it. I don't see people as a label, because as soon as I see you as a label, I don't see you. As soon as I see you as a label, I don't see you, because now I'm interacting with you based on the label. And the label could be about that conservative to liberal. That label could be geographic, where you live in the country. That label could be pretty much anything. And so what I think we need to do is shift from being performative and shift from just talking about the history of isms in this country, and start to talk about our biases and our judgments and our stereotypes and how they impact how we see each other. Because that's really what's at play in our inability to really connect with each other, is that we are creating stories about each other. That's what biases do. Biases are rooted in our past experiences, where we interact with people from a group and then we extrapolate our experience to everyone in that group, where stereotypes are widely accepted and not necessarily rooted in fact. And so every human being has the propensity to stereotype, to judge, to be biased, to categorize. And in my case, in the approach to inclusion and belonging work, it's really rooted in getting people to understand, number one, where those stereotypes, biases, and judgments come from, And if they choose to, think about how to deconstruct them so they lose their power over you when you're interacting with people from that group. And I say if they choose to because not everybody wants to get rid of their biases. I worked with a group once. There was about 100 people in a room, and a woman put her hand up and she said, "Well, I just want you to know that I don't really care what I learned today or what you tell me about how good people are or connected people are. I just hate people from that group, and I'm always going to hate them." And there was 100 people in the room, and I had to think about, how do I respond to this? And my response was, thank you for sharing that. So from this day forward, when you interact with people from that group and it doesn't go well, you have to own it. And I just moved on, because it's not about changing people. It's not about indoctrinating people. And for the folks who are doing that, they're part of the problem, because the true essence of inclusion and belonging work is taking people to a place of awareness where they can then decide and choose what they want to shift, what they want to keep, what they want to dive deeper into, or what they just want to let go of. And that's not the role of the practitioner or the facilitator. That's the role of the individual who's part of the group. And so I want you all to think about that. I'm going to do some more of these over the next week or two, and they're meant to cause you to think about, how do your own biases and judgments and stereotypes impact how you see yourself, how you see your groups, and how you see other people? Because that is truly the approach that will create results when we're talking about inclusion and belonging, which are the two words that I use. Belonging is that I can be a part of this organization, this workplace, this community group, this church, and bring my most authentic self without having to give up a part of myself to do so. And then inclusion is the policy, practices, protocols, behaviors that we use that either create a sense of belonging or create a sense of othering, which is the opposite of belonging. And so I want to leave you with that and just think about what is percolating for you. My website is delacruzleadershipsolutions.com. There's a contact place there. Reach out, ask a question, share your thoughts on this, give us your feedback, and just know that if you want to share something that's, how do I say this, that's demeaning or dehumanizing, that's not the purpose of what I'm doing. So I probably won't read it, just because there's no sense in doing that. If you have a perspective that you want to share with me, happy to check that out. So as we move forward and as we continue to drop these podcasts on, is DEI dead? I don't believe it is. I think it just has to reconfigure itself, that we have to really change our approach and change the way that we see each other through this space and through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, for me, it's all about belonging and inclusion and the differentiation that everybody needs to have a sense of belonging and inclusion wherever you are, wherever you're moving in and out of spaces. So thanks for listening. If you found this interesting, please subscribe, share it, and we'll see you next time. And most importantly, keep growing.